So, something I've been thinking about making a video on. I actually tried to make a video about this about a year and a half ago, probably, when it was first starting to, this particular thing was first starting to happen in my life. And yeah, I didn't sort of continue with the idea of making a video on it because it was only in its initial stages and I wasn't sure as yet how permanent it was or what to make of it. But yeah, I think I'm just about ready to make a video. It looks like I have, over the past 2 years, developed some sort of abnormality in my heartbeat. Yeah, I've had some attacks of atrial fibrillation, which is like an irregular heartbeat where the heart beats, where the top, I think it's the atrials in the top don't beat properly. They're not in sync with the lower atria, I suppose. So yeah, it's this unusual thing that happens probably once every 3 months, maybe 4 months, with me, where yeah, I'll get atrial fibrillation for maybe 12 hours, maybe more. Yeah, it's complicated because I seem to have get a lot of symptoms that aren't necessarily particularly common with people with atrial fibrillation. I mean, I'm very young to be having atrial fibrillation. Mostly it doesn't affect people my age, but it could have something to do, I'm sure it has something to do with my swimming history when I was young. I did a lot of swimming. Probably pushed too much, to be honest, with the amount of swimming I did. Yeah, I used to do like 10 kilometers of swimming. I used to do like 2.5 hours of swimming in the morning, about 10 kilometers, and then 2.5 hours of swimming in the afternoon, before and after school. So yeah, it was a lot of swimming. I did that maybe 7, sometimes 8 times a week. So yeah, it was kind of an unusual childhood in that respect, and I'm sure that's got something to do with it. Of course, there must be some underlying genetic disposition, because both my sister and my mother have occasionally get abnormal heart rhythms as well. My sister's younger than me, so well, she was also a swimmer. She did a lot of swimming as well, so it's all mixed in, you know. I'm sure me and my sister have gotten this earlier than usual because of our swimming history, whereas my mother only got it, I think, in her 60s, maybe. I'm 43, so it's a bit young for me to be getting atrial fibrillation attacks, but that's just how it is. And yeah, it's not particularly, well, if it's been diagnosed correctly, it's not the end of the world. It'll probably take a couple of years off my life. I'll probably die of a stroke eventually. I mean, everyone dies of something. So yeah, I mean, objectively, it's not the end of the world. It's not the worst thing, not the worst diagnosis to get, I suppose. But yeah, it kind of makes, each time I get these attacks, I mean, it affects your circulatory system, obviously. It's not that bad, to be honest. I guess I'll put something in the title about atrial fibrillation, so I may actually get more than 2 or 3 or 4 people watching this video. By the way, hello to whoever is watching this. I mean, I've never even figured out who subscribes and who watches the occasional videos I put up, but thanks for watching, I suppose. I mean, I'm not really doing this for I mean, it'd be great if more people watched it, but I'm doing it if you've watched a lot of my other videos for personal reasons, really, to get my thoughts out there. Yeah, so that's them's the breaks, I suppose. I've got this condition, and the reason why I haven't really made a video about it, I mean, I can't make videos about everything. Videos take a long time to sort out, and if you're doing a lot of other things like I am, bringing up a son and building a house basically on my own, yeah, it's a lot of work, editing and all that kind of stuff, especially if you're only just learning how to edit. You know, it's not something I've ever really been into. Yeah, so as I was saying, the reason I haven't really ever made a video on this is because I guess, like anyone who, you know, gets diagnosed with some life-threatening illness, goes through a stage of denial, I suppose. And really, that's probably what I've been, the kind of situation I've been in mentally for a while. Yeah, and also I haven't really, as yet, gotten to the bottom of whether anything I do can improve my situation or eliminate the attacks of atrial fibrillation that I get completely. Because I know that each attack I get is not particularly healthy. It feels pretty bad on the whole system. Yeah, I know that it's not something that is good on my system, and it's going to, I can feel that it will definitely age me quicker than what I would have aged without it, I suppose. Yeah, so until now I haven't been certain if there was anything I could do to sort of prevent it, to fix it, to cure it, I guess. There's still a lot of things that I can look at, but see, the problem with atrial fibrillation, at least for me, is anyway that it's the bouts of atrial fibrillation are so few and far between that it's not something you can try something new and then it just takes so long to get any feedback from your own body whether what you've done is actually working or not. I mean, certainly things that I've tried do make a difference. But yeah, I think when it all boils down to it, basically, there's nothing I can do to stop it, really. It's something that will get worse and worse as they get older, for sure. I mean, everyone gets old, everyone gets, you know, their body can't deal with things like it used to. But certainly if I got more sleep, if I was less stressed out about things, if I was less ambitious and goal orientated, I'd get less attacks. But as I got older, you know, it would catch up on me anyway, sort of thing. So it's the same with anything, really, with the body. It just sort of, you know, as you get older, systems start not working properly, and so you have to rely on other systems to keep that other system working, and so you end up, it's a juggling act, you know. It's like anything, really. It's management, really, of the problem. But yeah, for anyone who's interested, in my experience, there have been a couple of things that have helped. I don't know if this video is going to reach anyone with atrial fibrillation, but yeah, certainly getting a good night's sleep helps. I think when you have a lack of sleep, it increases your blood pressure, and I think blood pressure is one of the big causes of atrial fibrillation. And yeah, getting a good night's sleep. How do you do that? Well, in my case, I initially, I believe what was happening was I was taking some CBD oil, some oil made from marijuana, and that was sort of calming my system down and allowing me to get a better night's sleep. And initially that worked really well, so I'd certainly recommend that to anyone who's looking at alternative ways to reduce atrial fibrillation. The best mix for me was 2 to 1. 1 to 1. 1 to 1 CBD and with THC. So yeah, unfortunately, it's got to have the THC in there or it doesn't work. CBD, a high mix of CBD can actually, in my case anyway, increase the atrial fibrillation. Well, or at least increase the symptoms that go with it, that seem to build up to an actual attack of atrial fibrillation. So yeah, anyone who's interested, the two things that have helped me the most are CBD oil, CBD THC oil, sorry. So a mix of that, like a 1-to-1 mix, and also an earthing yourself at night. Earthing yourself the whole time is great, but yeah, earthing yourself with a copper wire that goes out into the backyard and attaches to a copper rod that's driven into the ground. Or you can use your power point, your outlet, the earth of your outlet, which I don't use because I wouldn't trust it. But yeah, look it up. Earthing sheets you can put on your bed. But yeah, I mean, if you can't afford a sheet, just use a copper wire and wrap it around your foot. That's what I have been doing. Only recently I bought an actual earthing sheet because I wasn't 100% sure if it was working or not. But yeah, I think probably what those two ideas were doing were helping me to get a better night's sleep. And that's probably really what it boils down to, is not overdoing things like I've been doing for the past 4 years in Australia, building an entire house on my own, lifting freaking huge beams, and just the stress of trying to get that done, and juggling the money and at the same time juggling being a single parent. So it's not easy. I don't need any sympathy, but I'm just saying that's probably what contributed to it. But the other thing that I haven't experimented with yet is the weather, because the weather here in Australia is just so different to where I was in Brazil. Brazil, in the north of Brazil, it's just so humid, and here in Australia it's just dry. So I would say that has a huge effect as well, and that's something that maybe in a year's time I'll experiment with, either by spending time back in Brazil or moving somewhere in Australia up the north where it's more tropical, and just seeing what effect that has on me, because certainly this all coincides with me coming back to Australia, whether that's just the stress of living in such an expensive country where you have to really work to survive, or whether it's the weather, I don't know. So yeah, when this all began, early on, I was interested to see, objectively, speaking, how someone like me would react to getting closer to facing up to their own mortality. This is like when you have an attack, you really are thinking a lot more about your own demise, because it's your freaking heart that's not beating properly. So yeah, it's kind of like shit. You realize how fragile the human body is, just how fragile it is, and how every little piece of the body depends on another, and just one little problem, which is all this is. Atrial fibrillation is just one little node firing incorrectly on the outer surface of the atrial, the upper atrials of the heart, firing incorrectly. And so you really do realize with atrial fibrillation during an attack, you really do start thinking about your own mortality, how fragile everything is, And yeah, that certainly one day you're not going to be around, just like everyone else. Everyone dies one day, and when you have health problems like you've never had before, it just really brings that home. And so yeah, I was interested really to see how it would affect someone like me. What would be the effect on my mental state, my day-to-day mental state? What effect would it have on me emotionally? How would all my great, wonderful ideas about death and afterlife and consciousness and all the stuff I go on with in these videos, how that would all hold up? Yes, I was surprised the first couple of times that I when I first came to the realization that that was a big problem, that would affect me. I was surprised at how, I guess I wasn't scared of dying, I mean, this is like a pretty confronting thing that I had to deal with. And yeah, I wasn't scared of dying in the way that I would imagine someone would be, so that was interesting. But one thing that really surprised me, because atrial fibrillation, you kind of when you're getting an attack, especially if you're young, I've heard, like especially if you're in your 40s, or if you have atrial fibrillation caused by too much exercise when you're young, the symptoms are terrible, like a lot worse. Someone in their 70s, 60s, 80s, when they get atrial fibrillation, sometimes they don't even know they've got it. But yeah, it's very different for when you're younger and you have atrial fibrillation. A lot of the time, it affects the person a lot more. Like, it's just so much more uncomfortable, and you feel a lot worse than what someone does with atrial fibrillation, in their 70s or 80s or 60s. I guess it's just, when you're younger, you can feel the effects of it. You can feel that your youth is being drained away by this, this problem with your heart. But yeah, I was surprised at how fearless I seem to be with the idea of euthanasia. And I was surprised at my own fearlessness, I guess you'd say. With the idea of, look, if this ever got too bad for me, if life was no longer worth living, I wouldn't hesitate to end my own life. So that was a pretty amazing thing. I guess, it just goes to show that I guess I don't fear death. I don't have any fear, and I don't know if that comes from what happened to me as a child with my near-death experience, or whether that's just my personality. I don't know, but I was just quite interesting at my own fearlessness in that regard. To look, if this ever got so bad that I was having attacks every day, or it was just never-ending atrial fibrillation, then yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to figure out some way to end it all. And yeah, so that was just an interesting point that came up with this whole thing. What about all my philosophizing and all my thinking and my thoughts about death and what death is, and consciousness and the continuation of consciousness, and what the material world is, and consciousness's dominance over the material world, as far as we can be more certain of consciousness, Like I, for example, can be more certain of my own consciousness than I can be of, you know, this tree, for example, you know. I mean, what is that tree to me? It's a texture on my hand, you know, and it's a brown sensation of vision. And is that texture, is that feeling, you know, is that color, is that a real thing that exists out there in a real world? Is the object the thing that is providing those feelings, those sensations to me? Or are those sensations just existing, you know? And that's my definition of consciousness, really, is just feeling, you know, sensation, perception. That to me is what consciousness is. It doesn't involve a thing out there providing sensation to me. Consciousness is that sensation. I don't believe in a separate world out there. So yeah, I'm kind of an idealist, I suppose. But am I really? You know, that's the big question. When I'm confronted with death, you know, what is it to believe in something anyway? How do I know that I believe this? Or is it just something I like to repeat over in my own mind, you know? And yeah, certainly coming face to face with my own mortality, the mindset that I'm in is certainly very different to the mindset I'm in right now, for example, thinking about this and intellectualizing. And when your system is so amped up and when your heart's fluttering and there's sort of adrenaline pumping through your body because you're thinking, oh shit, this is so bad. Yeah, it's you're not going to sit there and philosophize over, you know, the sensation of suffering, sensation of fear. Are these things real? Yeah, you're just sort of in the moment, you know. You're living in that moment of fear and you can't seem to pull yourself out of it and objectively look at it. Yeah, I guess, in all honesty, I do, during an atrial fibrillation attack, I do sort of catch myself thinking about, you know, my old thoughts about God when I was a child, you know, growing up, you know, my own thoughts about God and that relationship I thought I had with, you know, a perfect being, you know, someone overlooking and protecting. And so, yeah, in all honesty, I guess if there's anything I can report about it, it's that, you know, I kind of tend to revert back to my childhood image of God. And there's certainly no, how can I say, there is no question to me about ever submitting to, for example, submitting to Jesus, you know, something like that, and repenting at the moment of death. You know, to me it would be more of an insult to myself and to my God, if, you know, if that is a real thing, whatever that means. It would be more of an insult to me and him if I was to do that. And to some extent, yeah, that's kind of, if there's anything just to be said for faith, that would be my faith, you know, at the moment of death, that I would certainly be rejecting any sort of, you know, crazy dictator like God that demands full obedience and full love, and if you don't give that to him, then you're off to hell. That's something I would stand up and reject 100%. And yeah, I'm not saying that, you know, just to make myself sound any more, you know, noble at the point of death. I'm just saying that's how it was. So yeah, I was surprised at these things that came up. I mean, I guess, you know, if you're brought up thinking about God as a child, then as you approach death, I guess, all that stuff will come up, you know. So yeah, I have to be honest and just say that. I mean, I know that I love to philosophize and put myself so far away from the idea of, you know, a God or a higher power and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I have to be honest and just say how I feel, you know, and report back what I felt during those times when I was very sick. Yeah, and whether that's just all another, how that fits in with my, you know, existing ideas, I do not know. I mean, it'd be very ironic if I came full circle, wouldn't it? Right back to where I started as a child. You know, the belief in God, thinking about God, thoughts about God. Okay, so are they just part of consciousness as well? And if they are, you know, what does it matter? So yeah, that's interesting. I hope maybe, you know, so one particular person might be interested to hear this, you know, who I know watches some of these videos at least. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it. I don't really know what to make of it. You know, that's just how things are. That's just how I feel. That's just what I experienced. So yeah, thanks for watching. What the hell have we here? No, get the hell out. Smells like gasoline. So they were gonna burn it, but they never got round to it.